And I believe we're live. Let's get the word out. Tweet that out. Share it with Slack. Perfect. So today, good morning. Welcome. We are. Oh, this is too wide. We want this closer to there. We're gonna be continuing with minigrep today, which means we also need to remember where we're at. There we go. Updating the parse function to return a struct and not a tuple, and need to run and fix tests. Good morning, Miguel and Danny. Right, okay, so I was in the middle of refactoring to use a structure instead of a tuple, and I was sort of like changing the tests around to expect that, which of course will make everything break. Which, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but if we take a look at our library here, which apparently didn't get sent. No, it did. I think it's because it has failing compiling right now, so that's why it's red. But yeah, so we're here in our tests. We're saying, okay, we create our vector, expected struct, standard string, found reference. Oh, interesting. So I need a string in here too now. I thought this was doing it, and that this vector wasn't worrying about it, because these aren't carrying. I think I do need standard struct. Let's see, string from. The other ones will care when you fix the first one. Yeah, probably. We try to make it so that it autocast, and it works technically, but because like we were able to run it with that, but VS Code was not happy about it. We'll fix this here. Okay, so config, we're gonna parse input to unwrap, and config, instead of being a tuple now, is going to be a full structure that is gonna have query and file name off of it. Of course, right now we're returning a tuple, so config is not what it should be. So that should work. Then with this test, standard in, we create our string here. I'm gonna do the other string method to make it the same. Match parse input, a reference to standard in. And are we taking a reference to standard in? No, well, sort of. It's a vector of strings. So it's a reference to the vector, okay. Our error, assert equal, not the right amount of arguments, and okay. All right, so what we want to do is if we run this, of course, it's going to say that we're not returning a structure. So where do we want to put this structure? Do we want it as part of this module? I would. So either the structure is going to be part of this module or it's going to be part of main and the library is aware of it. But as far as I know, if the library is just aware of it, then it kind of makes me feel like maybe the library shouldn't. I don't know. It's a very interesting interesting problem. So we have a public module parse. That is for the input, and this is a structure specifically for the input here. So let's try that. We'll do, it's a public struct input. Now that I think about it, we're probably going to do the new thing, which is how we're gonna get it. So before I even finish that, let's change that right here. So let's enter it in here. This is all one line. Config equals parse input. It should really be parse maybe it's like our file options, like the config. The config struct is usually made public, so a lib can have both a CLI and a programmatic usage pattern. Well, right, so I'm gonna be making it public. The question is, do I put it in here? Do I make it its own module? Do I put it in main? Where's the best place for it? But I think the end result is I'm gonna have this public struct input, and then I'm gonna implement. Do I have to pub implement too? Input, and then pub function new. This obviously takes in self and returns a new. So this is where, what do I want to call this? It's like the config. So only struct, trait, type, and function can be made pub or pub crate. Struct, trait, type, not that. And if we call this the just config, then we're gonna return a new config. This is now config. So if I'm gonna do that, then yeah, this is pretty much gonna disappear and go inside of here. So really, instead of like public mod parse, I think this is gonna be public mod config. Or maybe just like public mod minigrep. It's the minigrep module. Okay, so you're yelling because you're not returning the right thing. Okay, so for our test, use super, we can do star there to pull in minigrep. Unused import, yes, I know. Okay, so parse standard in. That standard in equals this. So we're basically, we're pretending we're grabbing from standard input. Let config equals, so instead of, it's gonna be minigrep config new. Minigrep config new, and then we're going to pass in standard in, and I don't believe we need to unwrap there. It's just going to return the structure. Although it's possible that maybe we do, because I wonder if I need to do like the question mark operator and then return I'm actually surprised that putting question mark didn't cause red squiggly lines. Basically, what I want to do is I want to make it. This is going to return a config, but should it return a result similar to what we're doing right here? And if there's an error creating it, we just don't create it. Otherwise, we do create it. I think that would cause it to use minigrep config to external users. Super would essentially be minigrep to outside users. Well, super is for just bringing in this module right now. And then we're going to assert equal, config query is our query, config file name is this. Yeah, I think that we do need to make sure that, because if we fail, we don't want to panic here, which would translate to minigrep. Really, because like I think superstar pulls in minigrep. So now we can use minigrep. Because if I just start something new, I have access to it in this scope. Okay. Oh right, it's config like that. Okay, so new, we pass in standard in. We should probably do the question mark operator, which I think question mark operator can only apply to values that implement try, question mark, and then we need to return result and something like that, right? And then we're gonna do that at the end. Functions, wrong number of arguments, result, okay, error. Oh, so I think I need, what is it, okay. I can go look it up what I did last time. I just need to set up, it's also in like the Rust documentation. So let's go, actually also take a look. Did I set this up in our wiki? Because this should definitely be in there. So error handling, yeah, it's right here. So we want, oh, IO result. And then okay. So IO result, and then we return okay, and then that makes it all better. So this means that now config needs to return the appropriate thing, because this is all going to be implemented now up in here. So if I take this test and we comment it out, and that's because we're only going to be focused on creating a new type of configuration here. Let's run this and see what errors we get. Okay, so functions used as tests must have signature. Function returns absolutely nothing. Oh, so I can't return a result. Failed to resolve use of undeclared. Okay, so this is not allowed. I cannot return anything in this function. That's interesting, which means I cannot use the question mark operator. I have to use dot expect. Is it expect or unwrap? Okay, so of course there's no method for that name because it doesn't exist yet. But if I attempt to run this again, it should now tell me mismatch types, expected struct minigrep config, found absolutely nothing at all. So now we can start implementing this here. So for our config, we know they're going to want a query and a file name. So query, and this is going to be a type, well, string, and file name is going to be a type string. And so in here, we want to return. So we're not going to take in new self. We're going to take in, this is our vector. So it's really going to be something similar to this. It's going to be a reference to a vec with strings. What is it going to, sorry, input. And then we're going to just return a new config. And we're going to set the query to input of 1 and file name input 2. This function takes 2 parameters, but 1 parameter was supplied. Really? Like, you don't take in a reference to self here? All right, I want to actually try this and get the real compiler's error message. Cannot move out of index content. So query input 1 cannot move out of here. So the problem is that we have these strings, but we have a reference to it, and we're trying to move that into here. So we really, if we do a borrow, we don't know how long this vector is going to last. It might, I mean, so in the main function over here, it's going to be an argument. It's going to last the entire time. So we could set this as a reference and do a stir here. I just don't know if I want to deal with the lifetimes for that. So maybe I can copy it over. Right, because if I move it over, input 1 is query here, then this vector is no longer good, and then it goes away. Is that used ever again? Standard in is right here. We pass in right here, and then it's done. We don't care about it anymore. The function new shouldn't refer to itself. Normally is a static method, right? So instance has been. Oh, so that's the reason why. So it is like that. All right, perfect. Thank you, Miguel. All right, so what I want to do, figure out how to, do I want to copy it instead? Because it's a string, I should be able to copy that instead of moving it. I do like the idea of moving it if it would allow me to, but I don't think it is, because it's saying, okay, cannot move out of indexed content. I guess that's because it's in a vector, and if I move it out, it gets wonky. So I could try. So query is a reference. What if I did that this is a reference to a stir? I think I need to put lifetime annotations on it now, simply because they're lifetimes to stirs. And then we're setting that this will be essentially a reference to each of these. And now it's saying lifetime specifier. So we now need to have, is it on this side? It's like A. A. I'd probably clone the two input strings. Yeah, that's like my first thought, is like to clone them, and then we'll just like use a bunch of things into heap. Or let it consume the input vector. That's actually what I would prefer, is just consume the input vector. How would I fully do that? Expected type found lifetime A. Oh right, it's on, so it would be on this side right here. How do I consume the vector? Change reference to vec string. Oh, so not taking in a reference to it. I am just taking that, will consume it. You're not a reference anymore. We own it now. So coming into here, we are not passing it a reference anymore. We're just getting it fully. The trait bound standard marker size is not satisfied. Does not have a constant size. Oh, the U need to be strings again. All right. So we have that. Let's try running this and see what we get. We should be failing because cannot move out of indexed content. What? Still? So I need to copy it, don't I? Can I just do dot copy? Or is it clone? Can never remember. Well, it's not reporting an error. Okay, field is never used query. Field is never used file name. No method name unwrap. Is it expect? Oh right, because I'm not actually passing or returning a result, which is going to be like this same thing here. Because what I really need to do is this entire pattern right here. So we're returning the config right there, but first we really need to check if the input dot length is equal to 3, then we're going to do this. But we're also going to wrap this in OK. Else, we're going to do this one, which is the error. And at this point in time, we shouldn't need this at all anymore either. Okay, so what are you yelling about? Mismatch types, expected structure. Right, so we're no longer returning a config. Now we're returning a result with config as the success and an error as the error. Oh, it's a string. String is an error. Okay, let's try this. Okay, we got some warnings. Field is never used. Query or file name. Field query of struct minigrep config is private. So I need to make these public. So it was field query. So hub. Unresolved import minigrep parse. Use minigrep parse. Oh, this is in main, so we need to go fix that here. So instead of external create minigrep, I use minigrep config. What is it? It's is this gonna be minigrep? Yeah, that's my naming is not very good right now. Unresolved import, no minigrep in the root. Right there. Oh wait, no, it's minigrep config. No config in the root. Public struct config. Is it because I named it the same? That's probably what it is. So, because it's the same name as the crate, so that's gonna be a problem. Okay, so what do I want to? I don't know what to call this. So our module is I could just call it grep, even though it's not. Then this would be minigrep grep. And with you, we start up here. We use super right here, and then this is going to be grep. Okay, fail to resolve, used an undeclared type or module. Parse, where is that? On main. So our tests are still running, are still compiling through main. So this is going to be grep. Well, okay, so this is all not working properly. We really need to make sure our tests work before we start doing this. So I'm just going to go ahead. Nothing's working in main. So all the unused imports from main, that's fine. Running the tests. Okay, the tests are fine. We're returning a full out configuration struct. So we don't need this anymore because this was creating the new one. So we now have parsed it out into the appropriate thing. We want to repeat that down here to double check that that result is fine. So parse input should return. This is not parse input anymore. This is just config. So we have our standard in string from hello world. So we don't have enough things in here. We're going to match parse input. Parse input. So this is incorrect. It's now going to be grep config new, and we're going to pass it in not a reference, but like the actual standard in here. Then we're going to expect, okay, we're either going to get an error back, which we're hoping that we do, and then we're going to do that. So let's check our tests again. Okay, so that is working. We've made, so this is part of that red-green refactor. We changed the tests, we got red, and then we refactored until we got green again. Now we can come back into main, and so here we're getting all the arguments. This is going to be our big change right here. So we're not really going to do that. We can also use the question mark operator here, because like we're just going to do unwrap. We might as well do our we have it right here. So IO result like that, and at the end of the file we're just going to return okay. That failed to resolve use of undeclared type module IO. I guess I need to pull that in. Use standard IO. Okay, so inside of here, let's now go let our config is going to equal to grep config new, and then we're going to hand it the args, and we'll do the question mark operator. So that should be this. We no longer need that at all, which means that we now have our config structure. Let mute file open file name expect error opening file. So this is going to be okay. We need to open this file now, and our file name is really going to be config.filename. Let mute file content string.new file read to string mutable reference to this file content. We are searching for, and this is going to be config.query config.filename and the file content. So perfect minigrep unresolved import minigrep grep. No grep in the root. What are you talking about? It's right there. All right, I'm gonna try this, even though we're getting red squiggly lines, see what happens. So let's do cargo run this time, and just to take a look, our file is poem.txt. So it is low and poem.txt. Okay, so the trait bound, why are you so far left? I want you to be like that. So that config equals grep config new args, the trait standard convert from string is not implemented for standard IO error. The following implementations were found. Error as standard. Is it the question mark? Like the trait standard convert from string is not implemented for standard IO error. Do I need the unwrap here as opposed to the question mark operator? I thought that was, it returns result, but you were expecting result IO error as defined in IO result. Wait, let's take a look. So Oh, we need a different one. So instead of IO result, the trait from standard is not implemented for standard IO error. Standard convert from standard IO error. The following implementations were found. Our error as standard required by standard convert from. So do I not want IO result? Is it like, I think, is it another type of result that I need here that I'm returning essentially? The trait from can be implemented to convert between types, and saying there is no from implemented, right? But which one do I need? So if it's not IO result, does it, not that, standard convert from, standard convert, I need some other, instead of IO, I guess. Standard IO error, standard convert. Where is, then if I don't want IO, what do I need? I need to convert. I need to convert one. Is it just convert? The trait from can be implemented to convert between types. Oh, I need to implement the trait. So I need to use standard IO error as standard convert. Which one of these do I need to use? I would just use result underscore string for right now. Is it this result? I think so. No, it's in the library. Result is config. We do that. The type placeholder underscore is not allowed within types and item signatures. So I can't do that. I have to do, I have to put in what this is. You're putting, oh, instead of IO result. In right here. Oh, so you're saying like just return that. But I don't think that'll work either, because it's like you're not allowed within types of item signatures. We were trying this so I could use the question mark operator. The problem with that is that we would need it to convert over, and that's not doing that. The book does talk about, so Rust book error handling question mark operator. I think it was near the bottom. Okay, so the question mark operator can only be used in functions that return result. So in main, it doesn't allow that. Wait, doesn't it? Can you make the chat window shorter? Yeah. Yes, I can do something like that. I can make it right above my head. I can do that. Also, how is the size of everything? Do I need to make it bigger? Unnamed outsider. Good morning. Welcome. Okay, so I need the main here using question mark result string to error. Basically, you don't want IO result. Yeah. You probably want result just in here. So if can I do a result like that? And then it would be that. Well, would it be string? If I do this like that. Wrong number type R, expected 2 found 1. So yeah, so there's that, and then string. Oh, it's whatever error type for the question marks. Yeah, because I'm using error here. So is this making it so that from now on, whatever errors I return have to be, they have to be strings there? Because at least if I'm using question mark here in main, if I do another one and it's not a string, I'm going to be in trouble. I don't know why you're still red for me. We're no longer using standard IO, so we can get rid of you. The question mark will essentially pass on the error type. Yeah. If it gets too unwieldy, we could go back to normal main and then just do unwrap on these or expect. Okay, so let's try running our code again. Use of moved value config.filename. What? When did I move it? So let config equals, we create the new one, and we should own it now. Oh, so file open uses it right here. It's not the print line, it's the file open we use it. So we give it file name. I wonder if I can give it a reference to it. Okay, then it works. So we were searching for hello and poem.txt, and then we have the file contents. So that was a lot of stuff to get to this, where this part of the book where we're updating to a structure. Now, of course, I'm doing this the hard way because I'm not actually looking at what the book wants me to do. I'm just sort of saying, oh, it wants me to use a structure. I'm just going to go and do that before I read how to do that. But that's sort of like how I learn here is I don't want them to tell me. I want to struggle through it, and then I want to see how I was supposed to do it. Okay, so extracting argument parser. This is all part of the previous stuff. Wait. Is this? Here it is. The primitive exception was where we started off. Rust looks pretty hardcore. I guess that could be a way to describe it. Rust to me feels like it's a systems language, and there's some memory management going on, but instead of me like manually typing the commands to memory manage, I just have to be aware of how Rust is managing memory for me. But what's really cool is that I could just try different things and eventually I'll get it. Compact syntax. Well, so the other thing is I don't have to do this question mark operator. Like all of this stuff is because I want to do this. I could also do .expect and then write in my error message here, and then I don't have to do any of this brouhaha at all. It's just sort of making it nice for me, I guess. I have a little bit less here, but that means I have more somewhere else. Okay, so listing 12.6 shows the addition of a struct named config defined to have fields named query and file name. We've also changed the parse config function to return an instance of the config struct and updated main to use the struct fields rather than having separated values. So the book is still having this in the main file. We've long before moved everything to a library. But it's pretty much exactly the same thing here. They have used the clone method as well for us, or for themselves, and then just returning config. Also, they haven't put any error handling in yet, and we did. Does the syntax make sense when we get used to it? Yes, I think so. I think also just like one of the reasons I'm doing the stream every day, every weekday, is that allows me to sort of like always be looking at it a little bit every day. And that helps like the feeling that it's normal. The signature of parse config now indicates that it returns a config value. In the body of parse config, where we used to return string slices that reference string values and args, we now define config to contain own string values. The args variable in main is the owner of the argument values and is only letting the parse config function borrow them, which means we'd violate Rust's borrowing rules if config tried to take ownership of the values in args. We could manage the string data in a number of different ways, but the easiest, though somewhat inefficient route is to call the clone method on the values. This will make a full copy of the data for the config instance to own, which takes more time and memory than storing a reference to the string data. However, cloning the data also makes our code very straightforward because we don't have to manage the lifetimes of the references. In this circumstance, giving up a little performance to gain simplicity is a worthwhile trade-off. The trade-offs of using clone. There's a tendency among many Rustaceans to avoid using clone to fix ownership problems because of its runtime cost. In Chapter 13, you'll learn how to use more efficient methods in this type of situation. But for now, it's okay to copy a few strings to continue making progress, because you'll make these copies only once, and your file name and query string are very small. It's better to have a working program that's a bit inefficient than try to hyper-optimize code on your first pass. As you become more experienced with Rust, it'll be easier to start with a more efficient solution. But for now, it's perfectly acceptable to call clone. And that's also something because Donald Knuth was the one who coined the root of all evil is premature optimization, and that's where it's let's try to be as optimized as possible ahead of time, and because of that, sometimes taking too much time, and then you don't end up making the full application. Yep, all languages can look like gobbledygook. Well, that's why they're languages. They're like speaking foreign languages. You have to learn the syntax. You have to learn how everything fits together. At least it isn't Perl. Yeah, I refuse to learn Perl. I tried a few different times and then just gave up and just kept on going back to Bash and Python and other things. We've updated main so it places the instance of config returned by the parse config into a variable named config. And we've updated the code that previously used the separate query and file name variables, so it now uses the fields in the config struct instead. Now, our code more clearly conveys that query and file name are related, and their purpose is to configure how the program will work. Any code that uses these values knows how to find them in the config instance in the fields named for their purpose. Creating a constructor for config. So far, we've extracted the logic responsible for parsing the command line arguments from main and placed it in the parseConfig function. Doing so helped us see that the query and file name values were related and their relationship should be conveyed in our code. We then added a config struct to name the related purpose of query and file name, and to be able to return the values named as struct field names from the parseConfig function. So now that the purpose of the parseConfig function is to create a config instance, we can change parseConfig from a plain function to a function named new that is associated with the config struct. Making this change will make the code more idiomatic. We can create instances of types in the standard library, such as string by calling string new. Similarly, by changing parseConfig into a new function associated with config, we'll be able to create instances of config by calling config new. Listing 12.7 shows the changes that we need to make. So we've already also done this ourselves. And we can see that they now have an implementation, which is exactly what we did, except we called ours input instead of args. We've updated main where we're calling parseConfig to instead called config new. We've changed the name of parseConfig to new and moved it with an implementation block which associates the new function with config. Try compiling this code again to make sure it works. Fixing the error handling. Now we'll work on fixing our error handling. I don't think they are doing error handling in the book yet, like in this version of the app. Recall that attempting to access the values in the args vector at index 1 or index 2 will cause the program to panic if the vector contains fewer than 3 items. Try running a program without any arguments. It will look like this. So, yep, we can't even get that error right now because we don't allow ourselves to. The line index out of bounds, the length is 1 but the index is 1, is an error message intended for programmers. It won't help our end users to understand what happened and what they should do instead. Let's fix that now. Improving the error message. In listing 12.8, we add a check in the new function that will verify that the slice is long enough before accessing index 1 and 2. If the slice isn't long enough, the program panics and displays a better error message than the index out of bounds message. Which is just a panic, not enough arguments. But that's like the same problem. Perry, you've done well in guessing where the book is going. Well, I'm trying. This code is similar to the guess new function we wrote in listing 9.9, where we called panic when the value argument was out of the range of valid values. Instead of checking for a range of values here, we're checking that the length of args is at least 3, and the rest of the function can operate under the assumption that this condition has been met. If args has fewer than 3 items, this condition will be true, and we call the panic macro to end the program immediately. With these extra few lines of code in new, let's run the program without any arguments again to see what the error looks like now. So thread main panicked. The output is better. We now have a reasonable error message. However, we also have extraneous information we don't want to give our users. Perhaps using the technique we learned in listing 9.9 isn't the best use here. A call to panic is more appropriate for a programming problem rather than a usage problem, as discussed in chapter 9. Instead, we can use the other technique you learned about in chapter 9, returning a result that indicates either success or an error. Returning a result from new instead of calling panic. We can instead return a result value that will contain a config instance in a successful case and will describe the problem in the error case. When config new is communicating to main, we can use the result type to signal there was a problem. Then we can change main to convert an error variant into a more practical error for our users without the surrounding text about thread main and Rust backtrace that a call to panic causes. Listing 12.9 shows the changes we need to make to return value of config new and the body of the function needed to return a result. Note that this won't compile until we update main as well, which we'll do in the next listing. So this is exactly the same thing that we got. We're returning the config when it's okay. Otherwise, we return the error. For me, I did it like all at the bottom, so I didn't need the return statement. I just did if else. Our new function now returns a result with a config instance in the success case and so this, the static. So this thing right now. So it's the lifetime static. And from what I've read, the lifetime static takes this string and literally writes it into the binary. So that way it's referencing that instead of like any potential memory source. I personally want to stay away from doing this as much as possible. I'm not sure why they're choosing to go with the static here, as opposed to just like, hey, here's a string. Let's just return a full string. Yeah, so this is really weird. This is called a lifetime here. So first of all, the ampersand, it's same as C. It's basically, that's a reference. So we're sending back a reference to a stir. But because there might be memory management problems of like, oh, the memory was destroyed before it can be used, the compiler will freak out. So what they're doing here is doing this single quote static is a command to the compiler to copy this string into the binary itself so that it's always available. It's not ever going to be not available. And that's why it's static as opposed to some other cryptic, like a single letter. Yeah, kind of like a constant. Exactly like that. Our new function now returns a result with a config instance in a success case and a reference to static in an error case. Recall from the static lifetime section in chapter 10 that static string is a type of string literal, which is our error message type for now. We made two changes in the body of the new function. Instead of calling panic when the user doesn't pass enough arguments, we now return an error value, and we've wrapped the config return value in an OK. These changes make the function conform to its new type signature. Returning an error value from config new allows the main function to handle the result value returned from the new function and exit the process more cleanly in the error case. So I think the big thing is, this is the implement in here. They actually show us what they're doing in main. Not really. One thing that I am thinking about is in main, instead of the question mark operator, which does sort of pass on the error, which then causes a panic because there's no further functions other than main to run. I guess one thing it could be is I could do the match, extract the error message, print line it out, and then exit out with an error number. One thing that I would like to look into is, what does panic look like to a production app as opposed to just in our in this environment? So I might like compile out to that. However, that will be maybe a future time because it is 7:57. It's almost time for me to get ready for the rest of my day. So I am going to. Why won't you let me? There it is. Copy you. So let's go ahead and put this into our README here. Okay, so updating the parse function. This is, so the question is going to be, what does a panic look like from a compiled app. Thanks, unnamed. Have a good day. Why would you use static? In this case, is it normal to have your errors in the binaries? Also, wouldn't it be better to have your statics defined at one place and refer to them throughout your code? You could pull the strings out into consts if you wanted. Do an object dump of any binary and you see a ton of error strings. I mean, I guess like I haven't made enough of these applications to know what the appropriate thing for that is. I'm guessing it's not meant to be an example of best practice. Not being able to construct error messages with the contextual info will be annoying. Yeah, I mean, I can see both things. It would be pretty annoying if I make it through this book and I don't have best practices. So here we want to change until this. Change. Get the URL for that. Okay, so this is where we're currently at the full section, which is right here, calling config new and handling the errors. And we can sort of like see that they are going to make this very nice for us. And they're using some new stuff, so that'll be interesting. This is the second book, yes. The second edition of the book, which I found out is now available on Amazon and a couple other places. And according to their post in Reddit, the authors are making all of the proceeds to the book, they're donating to charity. So that's actually really nice. Of course, you could also just read it here for free. They got paid by Mozilla to write the book. So that's actually also really awesome. Let's see, what did I want to do? I wanted to go and push all this code up to GitHub so we don't forget. Today's struggle was really informative. Thank you, Miguel. I'm hoping that my struggling through it, I mean, I know it's really helpful to me, and I'm hoping it's helpful to anybody else who's attempting to learn along with me. I still do not understand why VS Code has this red squiggly here. It is compiling just fine. Everything is okay. It's just upset. Okay, so we are converted to use a struct in the library. And I guess it's not really anything else. Like, that's the main thing. So we're just gonna send that on up and push it on up to GitHub. Turn off and on again. Well, we'll see tomorrow morning when I load up, and I usually like reboot my computer before I stream just to make sure that everything's cleared out. If this is still a squiggly red, then I'm guessing it's a bug of some kind. And then I won't really know what to do at that point in time, besides maybe file an issue with VS Code or whatever's being used. The rest of the book is all high-level concepts. Congrats on getting through the fundamentals. Awesome. Well, thank you, Danny. Okay, so with that, we can close all of these now. Let's do our standard outro spiel here. I have all of in the Learning Rust repo, which I'm going to link here in the chat. I have this is all the code that we've been working throughout the book. I linked to any other code if it was like done in a separate repo here. But we're currently working on chapter 12, minigrep. We've also created a community wiki, which we can all update and edit. Specifically, we were going into the error handling section today to figure out how to do the result. This can now be changed by saying, hey, it doesn't need to be IO result. It can just be result. which will be just fine. I think, or it's a result with type. We have to give it like the what we're coming out here. So it's result. What was it? It was unknown and string for the error. It's 8:04. So my work starts at 9. I just have to ride my bike into work. So I'll be close enough to 9 still. But okay, so I've got this here. I'm also archiving these videos over to YouTube. I've got links in the description here on Twitch to YouTube, to Twitter, and to GitHub, where all this code is. On YouTube, if you're watching a VOD, I have links to Twitch here to watch the live streams if you'd like to see them. Also Twitter and GitHub. Basically, I have links everywhere. If you want to get notifications when I go live, which is at 7 a.m. Mountain Time every weekday morning, then follow all my channels, or just follow me on Twitter, where I post out right when I'm going live. Hey, come and take a look. And with that, I am going to go and get ready for work and ride my bike in on Bike to Work Day. So I shall see you all next time. Have a great rest of your days.